Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Growth Path. I need to have my finest NPR voice on this evening because it's late in the evening for me and I have a sleeping child above my head and I don't want to wake her up. So if you're wondering why I'm talking like this, it's because of that. So today, I'm super excited to have Hana on, and Hana is the transformational executive and leadership coach. Hana has over 12 years of experience empowering leaders and teams to achieve measurable organizational success. Before she was a successful executive and leadership coach, she was in marketing herself, having worked in certain various positions such as demand generation. I've seen in your profile as well across a number of different industries. You've worked on the agency side, from what I can see, and also on top of that, also on the tech side. So working at your last, if I'm not mistaken, your last full-time role in marketing was at a tech company, and that's in the SaaS space, which is super interesting as well. Have a look at that. But yeah, so Hana's combines evidence-based coaching techniques with a deep understanding of leadership psychology to help leaders navigate growth and change with confidence, align mindset, values, and goals with organizational success, enhance communication, emotional intelligence, and team performance. So as mentioned before, Hana has a good wide range of different experience across a number of different industries such as tech, SaaS, healthcare, finance, consumer goods, energy, and nonprofit. So Hana, I'm super excited to welcome you to the podcast today. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here. I'll have to work on my NPR. I don't have a good NPR voice. Maybe I should work on it today.
I'll teach you. You just go really low and really close to the microphone and try not to wake a child up. That's the trick, right? So yeah. The problem is that normally I'm so loud, like when I'm the guy that's on the phone that's like screaming, and my wife is the same. So I can only imagine how it is for our daughter to hear us both being on the phone at the same time. It's just wild. So Hana, tell me a bit about, first of all, I'm super proud of myself because I said your name right, and I was worried that I wouldn't say your name. So this was a big worry for me when we just started the podcast. But Hana, tell me a little bit about what you're doing now and how you got to where you are now. So you're obviously an executive and leadership coach, but obviously you were in marketing before that. So how did this come about for you?
Yeah, couple of different factors. I mean, I think ultimately just starting to understand me and myself and who I am, like I'm very much a helping person. And so even if I look at, well, I was in consulting previous to this, like it was still that very much of like advising, helping, coaching, consulting role. So I think it was a very natural move for me. And also the realization of, wow, like my greatest impact was not like the revenue, right? Like my greatest impact was not the campaigns or like the marketing tech stack. Like my greatest impact was always people based and helping teams and helping leaders and helping them walk through these various challenges and change and all of those elements and like navigating all of that. Like that's where I thrived in my consulting, in my consulting career and even previous to that. So I think it was just like an acknowledgement of that and a realization of that. I will also add another external factor. Both of my parents are coaches. So they have been in the world of leadership development, organizational development for as long as I remember. So I was just I was exposed to that at a really, really young age. I was like sitting on the floor of my parents' office, like doing Myers-Briggs tests, when I was 10. So so that very much was, part of my inspiration, I think, motivation to actually do it.
So coaching's a family business, so to say.
Yeah, it is. And my mom and I also sometimes work together. So it's been really fun getting to do that with her and like just being able to absorb so much knowledge from them as well, formally moving into it. They've always sort of been like my go-to coaches in my career, but when I made the move to coaching, like I actually got to absorb like different frameworks and strategies and like their processes for their business as well. So I could leverage some of that, which was, such a privilege.
Did they help coach you into this then, so to say? Like when you were wondering if you should leave a full-time job that you're already in to go out on your own and start your own coaching practice, were they ones that you leaned on, or how did that work?
Yeah, I would say so. And I have this like really stubborn streak of hyper independence, thanks trauma. But there were definitely moments where like I had to let go. And lean on my people while I was thinking about transitioning, also because like I was super, super burnt out. And so there was just like a physical component to that. Like I really needed support. And so, yeah, I would say like my mom really helped me understand what this actually looked like. And, when it came to some of the logistics, like where did I want to get my education? Did I want to get my formal certification? Like she really helped me map that out and coach me through that too.
Interesting. You mentioned burnout there. Is that something that you like? We can get into if you're comfortable talking about how you felt during burnout. We don't have to, but
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I'm like very passionate about it. I have my personal experience, and then it's something that comes up in with almost every client, honestly.
yeah, that was going to be my ask because I wanted to talk to you about a bit about your experience, but also the experience you see also on a daily basis dealing with leadership because I see it myself, right? I'm also I have my own business. This is my business, right? And I was also a full time like C-level in a number of organizations in the tech space, and as well, I've got my own burnout story. It was close to burnout, I would say, rather than being fully in it. I luckily caught it early enough, but regularly I see it across CEOs, chief revenue officers, CMOs. They're the people that I deal with regularly from all sizes, all types of sizes of businesses. And more, I'm starting to see it now that people are just like, I can't do this anymore.
Yeah.
Like I just can't. Like I guess you're seeing the same thing, right?
Yeah, I do. I see it often, and it's not a fun experience. Like you just start to see, and sometimes you don't see it. Sometimes other people have to show you, but like you just start to see how you respond differently to your external world, and it's not your best self. Like you're not showing up in the way that you want to show up, and like that is something that I sort of, like there was definitely a catalyst. Like there was a lot going on in our family life. My mother-in-law had a stroke. And so we literally had to like halt because she was caregiving for my son at the
Mm.
time. And we were like building her house. Like it was a whole thing. So we literally had to stop the way that we were living and like look at things. I don't know that everybody always gets like that trigger, that catalyst. I think sometimes people just like keep running. And so thankfully I stopped and was like, oh, wow, this isn't working. I'm not showing up as my best self. I'm not responding. I'm not regulating. I'm not able to do those things. And so that, was sort of a opening for me to heal. But I don't know that everybody always has that catalyst or that trigger that literally is like, you have to stop right now. They just keep going. And I think that sometimes it takes an outside perspective to show someone the way that they're showing up and ask them, hey, is this in alignment with who you really are?
For me, that's normally my wife. My wife she's got no problem giving me a kick up the ass. But to be fair though, she always calls it out. Like she says it to me. She can tell the signs before everyone else. She says, "Andy,
Mhm.
you're operating like a robot. Why are you operating like a robot? You need to calm down a bit here. Like
Mhm.
there's too much on your plate, you know."
Yeah.
But yeah. So tell me a bit about your experience. So you mentioned you were burned out. You were burnt out. So like, how did that manifest itself into work then? Like you said that you weren't showing up as your true self, etc. Like, what did that
Mhm.
manifest itself as?
Yeah, well, I think, at the time, and this was while I was at Mad Kudu, previous to that, I think that my identity was so tied to work, and like my value was so tied to work, so tied to my salary, my title, all the companies that like that's classic. And so I think that that had a huge, huge part to play in it, because as I then sort of moved into a different phase of my life and I was looking at my identity, I was realizing, like this is not how I define my worth. This has nothing to do with my values, and this is does not have anything to do with like who I truly am and who I uniquely am. And so there was a misalignment there that I recognized. But I think then continuing to be in that role, I just sort of like didn't have the time to stop and like reconsider. So, it very much then manifested physically, right? Like exhaustion, brain
Mm,
fog. Like we know what happens to your nervous system when you burn out. Like I was very much stuck in really like a freeze state where it's like beyond fight or flight. Like you're sort of in that shutdown state where sometimes people like they can't make decisions. They're just sort of like dissociating all the time. Like that's what it looked like to me. So I wasn't present. I was
mm,
exhausted, just like no ability to really regulate, my emotions, and like was very just disconnected from emotions, body, all of that.
mm,
So coming out of that, you kind of have to go back into your fight or flight, which is very much like you are starting to reconnect all of that, which is not fun. And I remember there were days like, and I truly just let myself heal. Like I just remember resting like I had never rested before and trying to come out of this and like regulate my nervous system. And there were days where like I just couldn't get out of bed. Like I just physically could not get out of bed.
yeah, I've heard. So a friend of mine had a similar experience. It was back. So actually, back in the days before people talked about it, like it was like, oh, he's just taken to the bed. It's like maybe just 15 years ago or so. It's like not that long ago, but actually, it was before burnout was actually a thing, right?
Yeah.
And he had some stuff happen in his life, like he had a parent pass away, and then there was a lot of stress on work, and then there was a young family, and too much all at once, basically.
Yeah.
Probably the best
Yeah.
way to describe it, right? And no, it's super interesting, super interesting. But how long did it take you to heal? So you mentioned healing. How long did it take you to get back on your feet again?
I mean, part of it too, I would say it was like easily 6 months. Part of it too was like I also was realizing that I was neurodivergent and just undiagnosed my entire life. So like that's a whole thing.
Mm, mm,
So there's a
mm,
lot of trauma that comes with that too. So it was like more than just work burnout. Like it's a lot
mm,
of other, it was a mix of things. So I think that there was also a period of my healing. Like there was a physical part of my healing,
mm,
probably took the least amount of time. Like I just remember having a whole summer where it was like at least 3 months where I was physically healing my body, physically healing my nervous system, like re-regulating, like lowering my cortisol, like doing all that stuff. And then there was a part of that process where I was doing a lot of like grieving of my identity pre understanding that I was neurodivergent. And so then I started to like really heal my identity and my relationship with my identity and like rebuild that. I'm not my job, I'm not my title, I'm not my salary. Like, who am I
mm,
then? Really, like,
mm,
who am I? Which is a scary question. So then I focus on that. And then the rest of it, I feel like, is just like setting up new boundaries and accommodations. Like, how do I accommodate for myself knowing this? Like, knowing that I can burn out easily, that I have a very sensitive nervous system, that I have a disability that I've been living with my entire life and I've never accommodated myself. So I think that like those three parts ultimately like probably took six to 12 months all together. And I think I still bump into those things every once in a while, but now I
mm.
see very clearly like here are the boundaries that you need to operate within, here are the accommodations that you need to give yourself, here's the way that you need to ask others for that. And when you start to feel this way, or when you start to see these red flags, like then you kind of got to go back to the body part of it and like make sure you're doing those things.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like there was quite a bit all at once there for you, really, right? Are you happy to talk about the neurodivergent piece? Is that okay for you
Yeah,
to talk about?
yeah,
Tell me a little
absolutely.
bit. Tell me a little bit more about that, if you feel comfortable with it. So, what is it exactly like? Again, all of these things are relatively new topics. I also have neurodivergent people in the family as well, and for me, it was also like this is all new to me. Like, what does all of this mean for somebody that's well, not that I know of anyway. I don't know if I'm in any way in that, like if this affects me personally, but what is it exactly? So what are you struggling with, and what have you been trying to figure out?
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, when we think about neurodivergence, like we're thinking about neurological differences in the brain, right? And it's this big umbrella. So under that, ADHD, autism, bipolar, like even sometimes just like anxiety and stress, but like diagnosed. So lots of different things can go under that. And I think that's part of my challenge is that like you don't always really know. Like ADHD is pretty easy to diagnose, and like I can see a lot of those characteristics, but you start to see all these other characteristics of other, neurological differences, and you don't always have an answer to that, right? So like that's why sometimes the label of being neurodivergent I like is because there's probably some other areas that I could look into or that I would identify with, but I'm not 100% sure. And
Mm.
then there's always like another challenge having a component of complex trauma because complex trauma can show up and look like a lot of those things too. So I think like that has been really challenging in terms of like in here, I'm at peace with it. And like, I feel really good about how I relate to all of that. But as soon as I have to articulate it or advocate for myself or, like work with doctors or try to explain it to somebody who, right, like that is where I get like, it's challenging, especially if you don't always have like a formal diagnosis. Like I have a formal ADHD diagnosis, but nothing else. So I think that for a lot of folks, that piece can be really challenging. So,
Mm.
like the self advocacy piece and like the self diagnosis in some cases and the understanding of what I need to accommodate myself is probably like the biggest thing that I had to work on first.
Mm. Yeah, the trauma thing is so the person that I know that's also going through a similar journey to what you're just described there, trauma plays a massive role. Like
Mm-hmm.
childhood trauma mostly, right? I mean, we've all had some level of trauma, but I think if there's it depends on the level of trauma and how much that affects and whether or not that trauma was properly addressed at the time or whether it was an ongoing trauma.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's you know what, like we're lucky that we're living in a time now so recently that it's actually been such a spotlight put on these things and that help is out there. I still think there's a lot of stigma with it. I don't think we're out of the woods when it comes to that just yet.
Yeah.
But I think there's a lot of healing going on which wouldn't have happened maybe 10, 15, 20 years ago or even 5 years ago,
Yeah,
you know?
I completely agree. And it's interesting too, because my brother has always been diagnosed with ADD. Back then it was ADD, which doesn't actually exist as a diagnosis now. But so like my parents, very well versed in it, but it's a totally different experience now. Like I'm teaching them so much about what it means today and all of the new education around like what's actually happening in your brain and what actually, the connection to nervous system. And we have really, really good conversations because like those are things that in the 90s, they were like, yeah, they gave us Ritalin and,
Ritalin, yeah, exactly. Yeah. I can't stop fiddling till I get my Ritalin. That was the joke, if you remember back then. Yeah, that was
yeah.
which was actually not a good way to treat it at all, I believe. But yeah,
No, no. Yeah. So I think it's changed the game in terms of understanding like how to accommodate, right? Like what you need to move through life and maintain your energy levels and be able to scale in a safe way.
how old were you, Hannah, when you got your diagnosis?
33,
That's a
34?
long time to be living with it as well before getting that
Yeah.
diagnosis, right? Like,
Yes. Yeah.
yeah, and also probably, I guess, when you're in school and stuff as well, there was probably like criticism of things that were probably just symptoms of you having
Hmm.
this neurodiversity, right?
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
the,
Yeah. And that's that like grieving part of like you have been told that this is who you are. But yeah, I am, but it's because of the way that my brain works, right? Like it's not like I'm choosing to be like that. And so I think like grieving the parts of you that felt like you were being criticized, like your identity was being criticized or left out or right, like people just didn't understand you. But now that you can look at it through this lens of, no, like there was actually something going on for you that made you behave in that way or made you react in that way, respond, whatever, you can sort of grieve that part of yourself. And I think like find a lot of forgiveness and a lot of self-compassion and love. And that process was very difficult, but like really helped me, I think, come into who I am today.
It's amazing. It's amazing. Well done. That's like, it's not an easy process, I guess, but you did it. Well, you're doing it, I guess. It's
Yeah.
probably it's never done. We're never done until we're really done. But I guess, so my experience with it is from people that I know that similarly affected to you is that they have a high level of empathy, which I guess is key to what you're doing now, right?
It is. Yeah. I mean, it's like everything makes so much sense. Like the things that I liked to do, like all my little like hyper focus passion areas, like it makes so much sense because of how my brain works. And I was actually thinking about this the other day. Like there are so many traits and characteristics that are under that neurodivergent umbrella that make me a really good coach, but might also affect me differently in my personal life. Like one example of that is I have delayed processing. So somebody might say something to me and the way that I respond to that is typically non-judgmental because I'm still processing that information. And so I might not have a judgment. I might be interpreting it, but I might not have like an initial judgment. So in a coaching space, that can be super helpful because I'm not judging what people tell me. I'm just receiving it. I'm just receiving their statements and I'm probably processing it later. I'm curious about it. Like I have, different questions about it because I want to understand it, but I'm withholding judgment, which is, any coach needs to do that. But I think like my delayed processing actually helps me with that because I'm not fully like I'm hearing what they're saying and I'm interpreting it, but I'm not like I'm reserving judgment on that. In
You
my
have no
personal life,
bias. There's no bias there,
yeah, there's
That's
no bias. Yeah.
yeah.
In my personal life though, like somebody might say something to me that I find really offensive and I might not really like click into that until later that day or even later that week and then like I didn't like that. And usually my body responds first before I'm like fully processing up here.
Yeah.
So like that's one of those things where it's like it helps me hear but not hear.
That's one of those. I thought, shit. You're in the shower and you're like,
Why did I say that?
God
Like why didn't I
damn
speak
it.
up?
To be fair, I think that happens to a lot. It's you're doing the playback in your head in terms of how
Yeah.
I could have handled that situation better.
Yes.
Damn it! I
Yeah.
could have said this and yeah.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
that makes sense. That makes
And
sense.
that's actually something that's interesting about when we think about neurodivergence, because you'll hear people be like, everyone's like a little autistic or everyone's a little bit ADHD, which is like super cringeworthy. Because yes, like these traits and characteristics are typically a collective experience, but you have to think about the intensity and the frequency at which it happens and then how it impacts your life. And so that's one indicator of like everybody might do that, but somebody who's ADHD might do it at like this level versus this level, or somebody who's autistic might do it at this level versus this level.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's the thing. It's like, I mean, it's not that people that are on the spectrum or that are neurodiverse or whatever. My experience at least is that when you see them in person or you have a conversation at a glance, you're probably not going to see much different. Like depending on the specific disorder they may have or whatever, however they're affected. But generally you may not notice it immediately. But if you spend more time with that person, they might lean into something a little bit more than what most of us would lean into. And that's probably the way that I would probably sum it up in my head, at least with my limited experience, I would say. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think that you start to kind of see like different protocols, maybe like the way people do things, like especially if they're like very routine driven, or you might see different responses when it comes to like external stimuli, or you might see like the like hyper focus or the special interests come out, which is always fun, where it's like, oh, you tapped into something, you are really into this topic, and like just that knowledge bomb. So like, I think the more time you spend with someone, for sure, you start to see those little things and you're like, huh. And some people, if you didn't know, like might describe them as quirks, right? But really, like, it's disability with beautiful characteristics that actually have so many benefits.
100%, 100%. There's the people that I know that deal with it close to me, like very close actually. Do you laugh about it? Like, do you laugh about some of the things that happen? Like, it's because I know we do. It's
Oh
like
yeah.
yeah.
Absolutely. You have to, like, you have to. And I think if you like, you have to get to a point where you can laugh at it. Like at first it might not be funny because it actually, like, there's some things that like actually I cannot do. Like I actually feel disabled. And like at first you really have to go through the process of, I think, like unpacking your own ableism. Like you have your own internalized ableism when you find out that you are disabled. And like you have to really unpack that. So at first it's like kind of upsetting, but I think once you get past that, like you have to laugh about it. Like there are things that, and I just have to, especially if I'm with a safe person like my partner, like I have to just like explain what I'm thinking and then we can laugh about it. Like I will be in conversation with him and I will just like jump from here to here and I will not fill in the middle part. And he's like, how did we get from here to here? And I'm like, you don't know what I'm thinking in my brain. And I actually have to say it out loud. And that's why you're confused.
Yeah, so I that sounds familiar. I've heard that. There's people I know. They'll start the story at the end, You're like, I'm sorry, what? You need to fill in the blanks here for me. I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
but hey, look, we're right up on time, Hannah. This has been really nice speaking with you. But I want to thank you so much. Where can people find you?
Yeah, on LinkedIn is the best place. That's usually where I'm posting, although I haven't been posting a lot lately, but I'm there. I'm still there. So
I feel like there's a lot of people nowadays, to be honest with you. I'm probably included in that bunch. I used to be very active there, and then I don't know what's happened with LinkedIn, but it's not quite the same place it once was.
yeah.
But there you go. But hey, look, I'll make sure that everything is shared in the description of this episode. I really appreciate you coming on, and if you're celebrating Christmas, have a very nice Christmas, or have a very nice holidays, or whatever you're doing over the next weeks, because we're just a week away. We're towards the end of December now, and all the best for the new year as well.
Thank you. You too. This was great.
Sure. Guys, this has been another episode of Growth Path. Tune in again in the new year for more great content. Take it easy, Hannah. Thank you.